The story opens on a quiet road where Terry Richmond, a former US Marine combat trainer, is riding his bicycle with music playing in his ears. Without any warning, a police cruiser pulls up close behind him and deliberately bumps his bike, sending him tumbling onto the pavement. Officer Evan Marston climbs out with his weapon already drawn. A second officer, Steve Lauren, arrives shortly after. Marston claims he had been following Terry for more than 2 miles trying to get him to pull over and accuses him of running. Terry, still shaken from the fall, says he never heard any sirens. The officers search his bag and find a large bundle of cash. Terry refuses to let them open the package at first, then reluctantly agrees when they mention calling a canine unit, which would take hours. Inside the bag is $36,000. Terry explains every dollar calmly. Most of it came from selling his share in a Chinese restaurant he co-owned. Some came from selling his car. $10,000 of it is meant to bail out his cousin Mike, who is sitting in jail on a marijuana possession charge. The remainder is to purchase a work truck and start a small business. The officers ignore his explanation entirely. They label the money suspicious and suggest it is connected to drug activity. They tell him he can fight for it in court, a process that could drag on for years, or he can face money laundering charges. Not wanting to make the situation worse, Terry lets them take the cash and walks away frustrated. He goes directly to the courthouse to arrange his cousin's release. A court secretary named Elliot looks at the seizure receipt Terry hands him and tells him bluntly that a piece of paper is worthless without the actual money. He also mentions that all inmates are about to be transferred to a state facility because the local jail is being renovated. Elliot ends his shift and leaves before Terry can press further. A young woman named Summer, who works as a clerk at the courthouse and is studying to become a lawyer, approaches Terry and offers to help. They sit down together at a nearby diner where Summer explains how civil asset forfeiture laws work. Police are allowed to seize money on nothing more than suspicion of a connection to drugs, and recovering that money through the courts can take a year or longer. She warns him that the police captain has influence in many places and suggests they leave when an officer walks into the diner. Before they separate, she takes down Mike's details. Terry explains why the transfer to a state facility is dangerous. Years earlier, Mike testified against a powerful criminal figure, which means being placed in a state prison would make him a target. Summer tells him he needs to find the bail money quickly before the transfer happens. Terry calls his former business partner at the restaurant, a man named Mr. Liu, and asks for $10,000. Mr. Liu agrees to mail it, since that is the only practical option available in town. With nowhere to stay, Terry spends that night in the woods, staring at the location of the police station on his phone and thinking about what comes next. The following morning, Terry arrives at the police station before the officers come in. He files a formal complaint with Officer Jess, reporting that 2 officers robbed him on the road and describing Marston and Steve Lauren by name. Steve walks in while Terry is still there. When Jess mentions the complaint, Steve immediately takes control of the situation and warns Terry that if he keeps pushing this, he will be charged with filing a false report. Before things escalate further, Police Chief Sandy Burnne steps in. He speaks calmly and tells Terry that everything done to him was lawful. He also warns him not to record the conversation inside the station. Terry pulls out documents showing where the restaurant money came from, hoping to clear things up. When he realizes he is getting nowhere, he makes a direct offer. He will not fight the seizure. He simply wants $10,000 back to post bail. The chief can keep the remaining $26,000 and Terry will disappear quietly. The chief listens, tells him to come back Monday morning at 9 and sends him away. Terry sleeps outside again that night in the rain. Monday morning he rides back to the station 3 minutes after 9. He is told the inmate transport bus already left. He races through the forest and manages to cut across and intercept the bus on a side road. He shouts to Mike through the window, telling him to stay calm, that he will get the bail money soon, and to demand protective custody the moment he arrives at the state facility. Mike nods. The other inmates cheer. The bus drives away. Terry calls Mr. Liu about the promised $10,000 and receives devastating news. The police raided the restaurant that same morning and seized Mr. Liu's safe, claiming it was part of a drug investigation. The raid was triggered by Terry's earlier statement at the station, where he explained where the money came from. Mr. Liu tells him he cannot help and apologizes. He is going to miss payroll. Terry returns to the courthouse and finds Summer. He asks for her help again. She is hesitant and tells him that helping him further could cost her the job she needs. She starts to turn him away, but then chases after him with something important. She has been looking at Mike's case file, and something does not add up. A misdemeanor charge should not result in this level of bail or this length of detention. She tells Terry there are only two real options to free Mike: a court order or paying the bail. The court order is nearly impossible to get quickly. Bail is the realistic path. She will prepare the paperwork, but he has 24 hours to find the money. Back at the station, Officer Steve is going through Terry's file. It shows he was a McMap instructor in the Marines, but has no combat deployment on record. Chief Sandy relaxes when he hears this and assumes Terry is not a serious threat. He asks Jess to look up what McMap stands for, but the station internet is running slowly. While she is still searching, she spots Terry arriving outside and alerts the chief. Sandy grabs his weapon and goes out to deal with Terry himself. Terry reminds him of their arrangement. He wants $10,000 back and everything is settled. The chief dismisses this immediately and tells him he is not in a position to make demands. He says the only reason Terry is still free is because their jail is out of service. Terry tells him calmly that he has been backed into a corner and will now have to respond differently. Inside, Jess finally gets the information. McMap stands for Marine Corps Martial Arts Program. Terry was a certified hand-to-hand combat and weapons trainer for the military. The chief immediately calls in all available units. Steve rushes outside with his weapon raised, but by that point it is already too late. When Sandy reaches for his gun, Terry strips it from him and unloads it in seconds. Steve moves in with his weapon drawn, but Terry uses Sandy as a shield, disarms Steve with a precise wrist lock, and drags the chief back inside the building. Construction workers nearby attempt to get involved, and one pulls a weapon, but Terry forces Sandy to order them to stand down. With Sandy in control as leverage, Terry locks the station doors from the inside. He forces Sandy to admit that Officer Jess is still inside. When Jess comes out, he orders her to disarm the others, put them in restraints, and take him to the evidence room. What Terry finds inside goes far beyond what any small-town police department should have. There are piles of cash and stockpiles of weapons filling the shelves. He tells Jess to count out exactly $10,000 and leave everything else untouched. He reminds her that was the deal. After pocketing the money, he warns her not to do anything that forces the situation to turn violent. He needs a way out. Jess cooperates. She walks him out with his hands behind his back as though she has him under control, and she tells the workers outside that there was a misunderstanding and everything has been resolved. They get into a police cruiser and drive away. On the road, they pass Officer Marston. Jess gives him a signal indicating everything is fine, and he does not stop them. Once they reach a safe distance, Terry tells Jess to report that he escaped. He removes the rounds from her weapon before handing it back, pulls his bicycle from the trunk, and rides directly to the courthouse. The town is already filling up with officers searching for him. At the courthouse, Summer has the paperwork waiting. Terry hands the cash to Elliot, who begins counting it while Summer rushes the release documents to the judge. Terry stands near the door watching every entrance, knowing it is only a matter of time before someone comes through. He quietly asks Summer if he would be sent to the same facility as Mike if he were arrested, suggesting he has already thought through what comes next. Before she can respond, officers burst through the door. They order Terry to the ground. Steve fires a taser. Terry absorbs the shock, tears the device free, and struggles against them before being taken down and placed in handcuffs. Summer records everything on her phone, shouting at the officers to stop. Later, a paramedic clears Terry at the scene, but instead of being taken to a holding facility, he is driven somewhere else, and Chief Sandy joins them in the vehicle. The chief admits that if he had known exactly who Terry was from the beginning, certain things might have been handled differently. He asks Terry what he noticed when he walked through the station and saw the evidence room. Terry tells him what was there. Sandy explains it casually, as though it is a perfectly reasonable arrangement. Their department was never properly funded, so over time they began selling seized weapons, first to other law enforcement agencies, then to anyone willing to pay. It grew into a quiet and profitable operation. The car stops outside a hospital. Sandy throws Terry's original $26,000 on the ground and has his cuffs removed. He informs Terry that Mike was attacked and stabbed at the state facility and has been airlifted in for emergency treatment. Terry tells the chief he warned him exactly this would happen. Sandy lays out the terms without any emotion. Terry takes the money, picks up a truck they have arranged for him, and leaves town permanently. If he refuses, he faces 30 years in prison. If that still does not move him, they will simply deal with him another way. A helicopter lands nearby. Terry runs toward it. He is too late. Mike dies from his injuries before Terry can reach him. A coroner informs him that Mike listed him as next of kin, which means his belongings will be released to Terry. Destroyed Terry finds Summer waiting outside. She offers him a ride out of town and hands him a collection of files on the way. The cases inside share a pattern with Mike's. Minor charges, unusually high bail amounts, defendants held for exactly 90 days before anything moves forward. She tells him she believes there is something larger being hidden behind these cases. Terry shuts her down. His only purpose was to keep Mike alive. He failed. He has no interest in fixing this town. He just wants to leave. He notices a police cruiser behind them, but Summer tells him it is a contact of hers keeping an eye on things. Once they cross the town boundary, the cruiser turns back. Summer drops him at a roadside stop. He thanks her and gives her his number before going to collect the truck the police arranged. That night, someone breaks into Summer's home while she is asleep. They inject her with a drug and leave the syringe visible in the sink. She wakes up disoriented and frightened. She almost calls the police before thinking better of it and reaching out to Terry instead. He drives over immediately and finds her barely able to move. Summer tells him she cannot go to a hospital. A positive drug test would end her legal career and cost her custody of her daughter. She admits she had a past with addiction, was once arrested after stealing something to fund her habit, and that it led to her divorce and losing her child. She insists she can push through and go to work as though nothing happened. The next morning, she is called into the judge's office. Someone has already reported her supposed relapse. She is required to take a drug test. Alone in the restroom afterward, she breaks down, knowing the result will come back positive, and what that will mean for everything she has been working toward. At the same time, Terry is driving through town when a cruiser pulls him over. Steve steps out. Within moments, 2 more cruisers appear, one ahead and one behind, all with their lights off. Steve explains that the newer vehicles only activate the dashcam when the lights are switched on, which is exactly why they keep them dark. He tells Terry the time to leave has passed. He wants to know why he is still in the area. Terry tells him a friend needs help and he will be gone soon. Steve makes clear that framing Terry would be straightforward, given what witnesses saw at the station. Then he places a weapon on Terry. Terry drops low as a shot is fired, taking the bullet in the back but managing to get hold of the gun. He uses the taser he still has on Steve, dropping him, then grabs his keys, gets into his truck, and accelerates into the tree line. The other officers fire at the vehicle as it disappears into the forest, but Terry gets through. Meanwhile, Summer stands outside her daughter's school, watching the girl play without being able to get closer. The teachers notice her and remind her she is not permitted on the grounds. She watches from the fence until a police vehicle pulls up nearby. Terry abandons his truck under a bridge and continues on foot. He calls Summer, who tells him that a contact inside the department warned her to leave town immediately and stay away from him. He gives her a location to meet and texts it to her. They reunite at Mr. Lou's restaurant, where the older man removes bullet fragments from Terry's back and bandages the wounds with steady hands. Summer is concerned about the severity of the injury. Terry explains that Mr. Lou served as a field medic during the Korean War and has dealt with far worse. Once Mr. Lou and his assistant leave, Terry asks Summer to walk him through what she discovered. He is trying to understand why the department has been handling things so quietly instead of coming at him with full force. The answer is in the files. They have been manipulating how long defendants stay in custody. Misdemeanor cases with high bail amounts, defendants held for exactly 90 days. Terry works it out. 90 days is the automatic deletion window for dashcam footage. They keep people locked up long enough for any evidence of misconduct during arrest to disappear. Summer is not sure of the exact motive yet, but the pattern is undeniable. Terry tells her he is finished running. He is going to make them answer for what happened to Mike. He leaves cash on the table for Mr. Lou and they leave together. On the road, Terry asks about Summer's police contact, the one who escorted them out of town. He wants to know if that person could testify. Summer tells him she never said it was a man, hinting carefully at the officer's identity. She also makes clear that testifying is not possible. Even sending one warning already put that person at serious risk. They track down Elliot and find him at a community event. Outside, they push him for information. He resists at first, afraid of being caught between two sides. Eventually, he tells them to look back 2 years to a civil lawsuit that nearly destroyed the department. Summer connects the dates. The unusual arrests began right around that time. Elliot tells them if they want the full picture, they need to speak with the judge. That same night, they enter the judge's home. Terry approaches wearing a mask. The judge recognizes him anyway and asks for Summer by name, telling her to step out. He explains that ordering her drug test was not meant as punishment. He was trying to protect her before the police decided to handle it more directly. When Summer asks about the civil case, he tells them the truth. An unlawful search led to a man's death, and the lawsuit that followed came close to shutting the department down entirely. To survive, the police found their own funding through illegal seizures. The 90-day detention system exists to erase evidence before it can be used against them. Summer understands immediately. The courthouse basement would hold archived hard drives. If Mike's arrest was filmed, the footage could still be there. Before they leave, they find the judge has taken too many of his wife's pills. They call for emergency services and watch from outside as the paramedics take him away. That night, Terry and Summer break into the courthouse basement. Officers are already inside. Terry and Summer hide and watch from the shadows as the police begin setting fire to the archive room. Summer finds a container of coconut milk and uses it to smother the flames before they reach the hard drives. Inside the archive room, they find rows of storage devices. Summer calculates that SD cards from body cameras over the past 2 weeks would include footage from Mike's arrest. At least one of them holds what they need. On the way out, Terry relights the fire to cover their entry. Summer stops and says she needs to retrieve one more thing, her urine sample from the drug test. She sends Terry to wait outside and goes back in alone. She is caught by officers before she can get out. Terry watches from the vehicle as they drag her away. He follows the convoy until it splits. One cruiser stays behind while the others take Summer in a different direction. Terry drives his truck into the lone cruiser at full speed, pulls the officer out and secures him. Under firm questioning, the officer admits he does not know where Summer is being held. Terry forces him to make a call to his superiors. Terry takes the phone and delivers a direct message. He has the evidence. If anything happens to Summer, it goes public immediately. The voice on the other end agrees to a trade. Dawn at a location called Rebel Ridge. At first light, Steve and a group of officers wait at Rebel Ridge with Summer locked in a cruiser. Hidden officers are positioned around the area in an ambush setup. Terry never arrives. Instead, he calls Chief Sandy directly, telling him he made this mess by going back on his word. Nearby, Officer Marston approaches Terry's parked truck and breaks the window. The officer Terry restrained the night before is inside, gagged and tied to the seat. Back at the station, Terry is already moving. He has chained his truck to the interior pipes of the evidence room and tears through the wall, creating a breach. Jess radios Steve and tells him to abandon the ambush and return immediately. Inside the station, Sandy searches the evidence room with his weapon drawn, not realizing Terry is directly behind him. Terry fires a less lethal shotgun loaded with impact rounds, dropping the chief. Jess enters with her weapon raised and Terry disarms her. He tells her he knows she is the one who has been helping Summer from inside the department and that she is the only woman on the force. He hands her the SD cards and warns her the chief will kill to get them back. Terry gears up, puts on a vest, collects weapons, and leaves a fuel canister as leverage. He tells Sandy that unless he hears confirmation that Summer is safe, he will burn the building down with everything inside it. The rest of the department surrounds the station. Terry tells Jess he trusts her and gives her back her loaded weapon. Jess raises it at him. She radios outside and says she has Terry in custody. She orders no one to fire and says she is bringing him out. Outside, she directs the other officers inside to help the chief. Terry drops his weapons bag. Jess hands the SD cards to Steve, who smashes them immediately under his boot. Then Steve opens his cruiser and Summer is inside, unconscious. He says she took the drugs on her own and pushes for Terry to be executed on the spot. Officer Marston interrupts and demands they take Terry into custody and get Summer to a hospital. The two men argue with weapons raised between them. Before it resolves, Sandy steps outside and shoots Marston in the legs. As Marston goes down, Terry understands. Marston was the inside contact all along, not Jess. While the officers argue about what to do with a wounded colleague, Terry grabs Marston and the weapons bag and pulls him behind a cruiser. He throws disorienting devices into the group and moves through them using hand-to-hand techniques. taking each one down without using firearms. He backs Steve against a wall and puts him on the ground. Marston tells Terry their only window is to get to a cruiser and activate its lights. The newer vehicles begin recording the moment the lights are switched on, and the system captures the previous 2 minutes of footage automatically. Terry has just enough time left. He fights his way to Steve's cruiser and hits the lights. The camera captures Sandy on film firing at Terry. On the road with Marston, Terry learns how to administer the antidote to reverse the drug given to Summer. But Steve grabs hold of the cruiser and tries to pull Terry out through the window. One tire has also been shot and the vehicle is slowing. Summer regains consciousness, sees Steve hanging from the door, and shoves him away herself. Marston tells Terry the recording needs to make it out. The DVR is in the trunk if Terry has to run. The chief and the remaining officers close in from behind, preparing to force them off the road. At the last moment, Jess makes her decision. She accelerates past Terry's cruiser and crashes directly into the chief's vehicle, sending it off the road. She then gets on the radio and tells every officer in the department that there is an officer down and they are escorting everyone to the hospital. The remaining cruisers fall into line and the convoy moves toward the hospital, with lights and sirens leading the way. Terry gets Summer through the emergency room doors. Then he turns around and runs back to the cruiser to retrieve the dashcam.